When critically acclaimed Hollywood star Marlon Brando was hired on to do his first musical film, the method actor was incredibly nervous. To quell his fears, he turned to co-star Frank Sinatra for guidance. But Frank Sinatra held a grudge against Marlon because the younger actor had beaten him out for the picture's lead role. Frank left Marlon hanging, kicking off a bitter feud between the two on set of the film that culminated in Sinatra apparently having Brando kidnapped. Join Factsverse as we explore how Frank Sinatra hated Marlon Brando enough to kill him. When Marlon Brando was cast in the 1955 Hollywood adaptation of the Broadway musical Guys and Dolls, many people in the industry were taken by surprise. Marlon was cast in the lead role of Sky Masterson, even though the newly established method actor had no experience performing in musicals. One person surprised by the decision was Marlon's co-star, established crooner Frank Sinatra. In fact, Frank had campaigned for the role himself, instead having his talents relegated to the role of second lead Nathan Detroit. Frank had pleaded with the higher-ups at Studio MGM to get the role of Sky Masterson in the Hollywood adaptation, but studio heads didn't feel the crooner was right for the role. Before deciding on Marlon Brando, other actors approached to possibly play him were Gene Kelly, Kirk Douglas, and Cary Grant. Marlon initially turned down the role after it first being offered, but was reportedly talked into accepting at the behest of a phone call from Cary Grant. Apparently, Cary called Marlon up and told him to take the role to piss off Frank Sinatra. The studio and creative team behind Guys and Dolls were interested in having Marlon Brando take on the lead role despite his lack of musical experience. Marlon was the new hot thing in Hollywood, and MGM was sure they could make magic by casting him in a musical. When Marlon expressed his hesitance to take the role, director Joseph L. Mankiewicz shared that Marlon had no reason to be nervous, as the filmmaker had never been involved in a musical either. Marlon and Joseph's lack of experience filming musicals meant Frank Sinatra was one of the most experienced people on set. However, Sinatra wasn't willing to lend any advice to Brando. Early on in the production, Brando turned to Frank Sinatra for support. Angry about losing out on the lead role and hesitant about the much younger actor, Frank refused to give it. Marlon apparently asked Frank to help him rehearse the film's musical numbers, to which Frank retorted he wasn't interested in Marlon's method acting. Marlon had reluctantly signed on to play the lead in Guys and Dolls, believing his singing voice was going to be dubbed over by a more talented singer in the final cut. But this didn't end up happening. Instead of dubbing over Marlon's voice, MGM went all out teaching the star how to sing. Still, Marlon ended up needing many takes for some scenes in the film as a result of his inexperience. His acting style also differed from Frank's. Frank always preferred to get things done in one take, while Marlon preferred to do a few. Marlon's need for extra takes during both his singing and talking scenes got on Frank's nerves. Although Marlon was apparently uncomfortable with his vocal performance, the production team ended up getting enough footage of the actor that they were able to cobble together a final product that made it look like the actor could sing. Marlon's lack of singing talent was just one of the reasons that Sinatra was mad the younger actor had secured the lead role over him. Near the start of production, Marlon had won an Academy Award for his performance in On the Waterfront. Frank had campaigned for the very same role and had been beaten out by the younger actor. When Marlon beat Frank yet again for the lead in Guys and Dolls, the legendary crooner was fuming. Despite the call from Cary Grant pleading for Marlon Brando to piss Frank Sinatra off by taking the role, it doesn't appear that Marlon had any personal vendetta against Sinatra. Instead, Marlon simply felt the role of Sky Masterson was going to be a good way to expand his horizons. He worked amicably with Frank, but Frank wasn't having it. When Marlon realized Frank hated him, the younger actor slowly started to hate the established Hollywood veteran. This led to the creation of their infamous feud that resulted in Brando getting kidnapped. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already, and stick around for more about Marlon and Frank's feud. Not long onto the production of 1955's Hollywood adaptation of Guys and Dolls, the on-set feud between Marlon Brando and Frank Sinatra made it so the two refused to talk to each other when cameras weren't rolling. They communicated via third parties, and Frank took every opportunity to disparage his younger co-star. Marlon's method acting and need for extra takes resulted in Sinatra giving the younger star the derogatory nickname Mumbles. Marlon leaned into the criticism, going out of his way to require even more takes to piss off Frank. In a scene where Sinatra was required to be eating a piece of cheesecake, Brando purposefully messed up his lines so many times that Frank became nauseous from consuming too much of the dessert. Many feared that things between Marlon and Frank were going to end up getting physical, and it seems they did in an unusual way. The event that allegedly made things finally come to a head between Marlon and Frank was Frank's wife showing up on set one day and taking a romantic interest in the younger actor. At the time of filming, Frank Sinatra was towards the end of his marriage to Ava Gardner. The two were rampantly unfaithful to each other, but that didn't stop Frank from getting jealous and angry when Ava reportedly started showing interest in Marlon Brando. Ava certainly got away with cheating on Frank many times, but her cheating on him with Brando crossed the line. Instead of taking his anger out on Ava, Frank took it out on his co-star. Soon after the incident involving Marlon Brando and Ava Gardner, Marlon was apparently abducted one night while out driving on his motorbike. While Marlon was pulled over at a rest stop, 3 men allegedly came at him with guns and forced him into the back of a black car. Inside, the 3 men told Marlon they were either going to kill him or castrate him, a threat that the actor apparently took very seriously. Marlon was so terrified he was said to have pooped his pants. Thankfully, the actor didn't meet his end. The 3 men dropped Marlon Brando off in the Hollywood Hills, where the actor frantically flagged down a car and managed to get a ride back to his home. When questioned about his injuries, Marlon claimed he'd gotten into a motorcycle accident. The 3 men had thankfully refrained from harming Marlon's face, allowing filming to continue. From that moment on, Brando kept his distance from Frank when the cameras weren't rolling, and he apparently even hired a new bodyguard to accompany him on set. Marlon never ended up pointing the finger at Frank Sinatra, though the actor's lifelong friend Carlo Fiore did. According to Carlo, there's no doubt Frank Sinatra was behind the incident. Carlo is the only person Marlon ever revealed the truth about his supposed motorcycle accident to, and he went on to share the story after Marlon and Frank's deaths. Despite this insane feud, the film ended up being a major success for everyone involved. Frank's bitterness on the set extended past his feud with Marlon and extended to his relationship with the film's writer and director. Frank reportedly defied the direction of filmmaker Joseph Mankiewicz numerous times during filming, and the crooner went on to pledge he would never work with the director again. Marlon Brando's bad time made it so he didn't want to do much publicity for the picture, but MGM managed to convince the star otherwise by purchasing him a brand new Thunderbird. Now it's time to hear from you. Did you know Frank Sinatra allegedly had Marlon Brando kidnapped during the filming of Guys and Dolls? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.